Representative Dale Kooyenga recently sat down with the McIver News Service to explain how an $800 million tax reform package could impact Wisconsin's structural deficit.
There's different types of structural deficits. There's structural deficits that we absolutely should be concerned about, and that is, for example, the Doyle administration had structural deficits that were in the billions, and those deficits they came about because of increases in spending, which hurt growth in the economy for government spending, as opposed to Governor Walker's structural deficit, which is a fraction of the previous structural deficits, but are actually pro-growth structural deficits because of tax cuts.
He went on to explain how modest economic growth can quickly erase a structural deficit.
The structural deficit is looking at a period that is 24 months from now, on average. So the current budget, we're going to have a budget surplus again. There's actually going to be cash in the account at the end of this budget, and that budget goes all the way until June 30, 2015. Now the structural deficit is saying, okay, for the period from July 1, 2015 to July 2017, what is the difference between the cash coming in and the cash going out? Now, the structural deficit, that's an arbitrary cutoff. And because of that arbitrary cutoff, you have a little bit of difference in timing between the cash going in and the cash going out. And that's where the $800 million comes from. Now, here's a very important point. The individuals that are concerned about the structural deficit have raised this concern 4 times in the last year. When the governor's budget originally came out, February of last year, the governor had a tax cut. And that budget actually led to a very small, but had a very small structural deficit. There was objections raised. Then in May of last year, there was news from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau that we had explosive revenue growth, and the previous structural deficit became a surplus. We did another tax cut. Their concerns again were that we were raising up a structural deficit. Once again in October we had news that that deficit then was a surplus. In January now we have the same thing. We once again have this structural deficit that was predicted as of 3 weeks ago is no longer there because we have this additional revenue, so now we have another structural surplus. So my point is that these objections of, hey, 24, 30 months from now you're going to have this budget deficit, we're saying no. If you actually have pro-growth tax cuts, you're going to grow your way right out of that, and quite frankly, the numbers on these structural deficits in a $70 billion budget are so small that usually just inflation with population growth and very anemic economic growth, you grow your way right out of this. So let's move towards lower taxes, because lower taxes are actually going to move us to be more financially solvent.
For the McIver Institute, I'm Bill Osmolsky.